even thinking back to experiences that have emotional charge to them, when you think about those experiences, are the emotions still as real in the moment
Mm.
as when you experience them for the first time?
Hello and welcome to the Wealth Within Us. Today I have Dr. Jess Crowley, and she is not your ordinary chiropractor. Although she's a chiropractor, she practices much differently. And welcome so much. Thank you for taking the time today. And I would love to know how you got started. So this is two parts. So how did you get started? And then if you would get into the type of chiropractic that you offer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Um, the Not Your Traditional Chiropractor is kind of a fun way just to introduce a little bit about what I do. How I got into it was um, basically growing up in a health and wellness minded family. My mom is a physical therapist. So, one of my favorite things to do while growing up, playing sports, being crazy with my brothers outside, we would inevitably injure ourselves to some capacity. And so she would kind of help piece us back together. So one of my favorite things growing up was having that, like, almost like personal um, medical personnel
Mhm.
available at any of my sporting events. All my teammates were like, if you needed an ankle wrapped, if you needed something stretched or worked out, like my mom was just there. And that was really, really special and important to me growing up. So that was kind of the intro to preventative yet reactionary. It's kind of both ends of, like, kind of the medical world. So
Yeah.
the one side of being stretched out, having your muscles balanced and supported so that you can do the physical activities that you want to do. All of that was super important to me. So naturally, I wanted to be my mom. So my whole kind of intro to, college and undergrad was all science based. It was all, I'm going to go into the medical field at some capacity. And I graduated, had a great time. Um, and then my life kind of took a little bit of a U-turn where I started applying to schools and none of them really felt right. So I ended up working at a rehab center. So we had physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, pediatrics. So I got kind of a good mix of a
Yeah.
lot of different people.
Well rounded.
Yeah, it was really, really cool. Um, and I just kind of fell into that was just, I was working, I was trying to figure it out. It was kind of a lower point in my life, of like, what really do I have to offer the
Mhm.
world? So, like, where I know that I have a passion for people. I know that I have a passion for preventative wellness, health model, whatever that looks like. Um, and I just didn't really know where to go, what to do with it. So I ended up touring chiropractic school in South Carolina, and it turned out to be a really good fit for me. So a lot of my classmates would have these stories of, like, oh, when I was younger, a chiropractor saved my life or helped me recover from this XYZ. And I was just kind of there and I didn't really know why, which is funny because looking back, it's like I'm definitely where I am for a reason. And so it just kind of found me.
Yeah, and
And
it's good you took
so
that break because had you not taken not
exactly,
taken the break, you may not have found that.
exactly. And that's part of, like, trusting the process of just, like, jumping into something, um, and then realizing maybe that's not the right fit. And so trying something else and having, yeah, kind of the capacity to do that. And my mom was super supportive, which is fun because the chiropractic model very much is kind of using the body's natural innate intelligence, the life force within us, to just amplify what the body already knows what to do with, So
Yeah.
the healing process is you get a cut and the body knows how to heal it, just takes time. So allowing that, the disruptions within just our systems that come with stress and tension and holding onto patterns in certain ways, disrupting those patterns that we hold on to so that your body can kind of self-evaluate, self-heal,
Mhm.
and then rise to this other level of like what life could be like. So
So it's
yeah,
basically not just the physical components, but it's the mental and emotional components as well.
exactly. Yeah. And that's why kind of the idea of being a chiropractor and also recognizing that there's so much more than just neck pain and back pain involved, which is why we say like it's not your typical chiropractic, because the type of chiropractic we do is so much more than just popping and cracking. We don't actually pop and crack anything. So yeah, so it's been really fun. It's been a journey. Still learning every day in
Wow.
practice from people who have been under care much longer than I've been alive. So just the lessons that they have to teach me and the stories that they have to share are just so powerful. And yeah, it's been really fun. And now living in I'm in Pennsylvania now, which is not a place that I ever thought that I would end up in. So just yeah, just along for the ride.
Yeah, and you're definitely, you made an impression on me, I have to say. So I really would love to talk about the emotional component about this, because whether we think so or not or realize it, I think that emotions are at the core of anything, whether it be disease or healing or not getting the job you wanted, not progressing
Yeah,
here or being stuck. I really do feel that it's not the whole picture, but I think emotions are a big part of that picture.
absolutely. Yeah. And emotions, we like to kind of think of them as like feelings or this experience that we have in reaction to something, right? So emotion really is just energy and motion. So an emotion is it is a response to a situation,
Mhm.
and emotions really should just be almost a split second feeling. So it should be the way that our bodies are kind of like designed to experience life is to take in, the environment, to feel, and then to kind of release and let go. Um, what we are really good at as humans is holding on to a lot of those things
Yeah.
um, that maybe aren't serving us, or that we feel like we get stuck in these loops of feeling things because it's hard to move on, or like we don't know how to let go.
Mhm.
So there's definitely a lot of emotional components that we
Yeah.
see,
Or
just with
avoiding
people.
feeling them too. I find throughout
Yeah,
my life, avoidance, which the avoidance of the emotions is then those emotions never get released.
exactly. Yes. And avoiding doesn't mean it's not there. It just means that
Yeah.
you don't feel it,
So
right?
true. Very true to point that out.
No, I hear you. And that's part of my journey to finding the type of chiropractic that I practice now. Is that was me. I mean, growing up, I was oldest child of four, so kind of a strict household, but still loving parents. But there was definitely this almost like performance. I felt like I had to be a certain something to find value in myself. And so when emotions come up, there's no room to feel in
Yeah.
that sort of environment. So yeah, you just kind of shove it down and
Mhm.
say, well, I need to move forward. I need to move on. There's no time. There's no
Yeah.
energy to process this. Or I shouldn't be feeling this. And so I'm just going to ignore it.
I don't have
Um,
time to feel this. I don't have the
yeah,
energy to feel this. Yes, I could
exactly.
come up with a lot of excuses for that personally.
So many excuses. Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, the fact that we do experience so many things on even just a daily basis, like having the emotional capacity to take in and process is definitely it's a trained thing. And so allowing your body grace even
Yeah.
to feel what it needs to feel in the moment is hard.
And I think even societally, I think we've been kind of taught not to do that, to be honest.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
especially when I grew up, it was like, you know, I don't think I ever once saw my dad cry, to be honest. And like that was what he was showing us. So remember, it was like, don't cry, or that famous there's no crying in baseball. You
Exactly.
know, so it's like over and over again that crying or showing emotion is a sign of weakness. I mean, of course, there's
Yeah,
the extreme opposite of it too, where it's not good, but I think the balance hasn't really been modeled in our society, at least here in the West, in the US.
absolutely. Yeah. I think a lot of the trends are slowly changing in that direction. But especially generationally. I mean, there's so much that gets passed down just through our
Yeah.
family lines that it's like um, tendencies towards feeling or not feeling certain emotions, or having outbursts when you're like, oh, where did that come from? I didn't even know
Yeah.
that was an issue for me, you know?
Yeah.
But maybe your dad, you know, had outbursts and that was just modeled in that way. So
Yeah, and
the
I
way
think
the
it tends to
body,
be fear too. Like we don't want
yeah,
to, because we don't feel safe, or we're afraid to show our, like I'm sure there's a lot of other stuff that's connected to even expressing them.
yeah, oh yeah. And the way that our bodies naturally hold on to things
Mhm.
is that I mean, your body keeps the score. There's a great book actually called The Body Keeps the Score. But everything that we experience, your body will actually hold on to. In the past, like as an animal would like move through life, that sort of thing. Like it's a learning experience. So you take in your environment, something happens, you learn from it, and then you maybe make a different decision in the future. So within our bodies, our systems are built to learn and adapt with our environments. And so when things start to get stored and stuck in certain places, we lose that capacity to adapt. And then our system becomes overloaded and tends to just shut down. So that's where we find a lot of people these days in just our typical like 9 to 5 job, where you just kind of are numb to the world around
Yeah.
you or tend to dissociate, that sort of thing. So
Yeah, because if you think about it, we're really not meant to be in a box for like, and that includes even the classroom. Like you figure from the time if you're in kindergarten, 5 years old, even if you're up through college, you're literally in a box. And then you get out of that box and maybe you have a little bit of freedom. But then if you work corporate or something like that, you're just put into another box.
back in a box. Yeah.
Yeah, back in a
And it
box. And
hurts to
and then
feel like you're
everything
stuck.
builds. And it's like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
where's my creative freedom? Where's my free time? Where's my time to even think? And like you said,
Yeah.
you took that time off. Like, where do I even have the time to know and really reflect and take inward? Well, what is it that I'm here to do? What am I meant to do? What is
Yeah.
my passion? Where do I belong?
And
And
what do I want to do? What gives me
yeah.
joy? Like, do
Mhm.
you have time to even experience joy anymore? Or is everything just kind of scheduled out because you feel like you have to do certain things?
Mhm.
And then it's nighttime and you go to sleep and do it all over again, you know? So,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, so it's tough. There's a lot that we've experienced just um, as a society that makes it difficult to kind of feel our feelings because there's not a lot of space that we're given.
Yeah. And I do think things are changing. I mean, I think more people are working remote, and companies, of course, I'm sure it comes from a bottom line, but they're realizing that, oh, maybe it's not so advantageous to have this big office space, or to be paying all
Sure.
utilities that make that big space run, and people, you can get up and you can walk around and move around. And I remember, I'm a Gen X or so. I graduated college in the mid-90s. And during that time, I worked corporate, and it was like you almost, and it's kind of weird if you think of like, unless you smoked. And at the time, more people.
Right. Then you don't get outside.
Then you don't get outside. And it's almost like you're like, well, who's looking at me going to the bathroom? Like, she's away from her desk. What's she doing? Where's she going? What, like, it was just a very, I only worked corporate for a couple of years, and then I was fortunate. I found myself laid off and started my own business. But yeah, I did not, I found that environment extremely taxing on the nervous system, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah. And that can be tough. And it's set up that way, basically to, make money and use the time that you're there for productivity reasons. And basically, not to say like all corporate jobs are horrible, because a lot of companies are putting things into place that are good for employee health. And but as a general trend, you're right.
Yeah, exactly. Because you think about it, if you have happy employees, you would think you would have happy sales. And whatever it is that your happy customers and things like that, they all seem to go around. But yeah, well, I could go off on a tangent about that, but I won't.
I could go off with you. We actually, in a lot of our training for the business that I work at, just answering the phone with a smile, whether it's, real or you're just like putting a smile on, but it will change the tone of your voice and therefore change the interaction of the phone call. So we're actually taught to answer the phone, hi, like with a smile, and that,
and it probably changes your own energetic nervous system as well.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. And just that expression of like, okay, it's okay. We're having a good time.
I think sometimes we get so worked up over things, and even just to reflect immediately after, you think, really, I got all worked up over that? That really wasn't even that big of a deal. Or some people just harbor that stuff, and it's like and we all know people like that. Everything ticks them off, and you're like, oh my gosh.
And the fuse starts to get shorter and shorter and shorter, especially throughout the day.
Tolerance is shorter and shorter.
Yeah. And then you get home to your kids or your family, and then, the first thing is like, well, what about this? And you're like, well, I just got home. And then it's like this whole big thing. And then you reflect on like, well, I didn't mean to respond that way.
Yeah.
I don't want that to be my natural response. But when you kind of go through your day where things are just like kind of coming at you, you don't have space to process.
Safety, I feel too, or the safety to process.
Yeah, to release them and to allow your nervous system to balance the sympathetic, the fight or flight, the go, go, go is not balanced with the parasympathetic, the rest and digest, the safety piece of it. You're just constantly stuck in that like aroused, energized, and almost like, you're like your string is pulled a little bit too tight, and then it only takes one little thing and then you feel like you're snapped. So we see a lot of that too with parents, with moms, teachers, just people who are around a lot of input often. Yeah.
Yeah. And whose job it is really to give of themselves in those situations. Yeah. And imagine that scenario. Now you've got two parents or two people that are coming together in that same environment. And it's like, unless you, and what if you would, now you're in traffic on the way home, potentially. I mean, that just like compounds the whole
cut off on the highway. Yeah. That never happens in Pennsylvania. It's never.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And then you hit a pothole and that. But anyway.
So that's kind of the base state that a lot of people come into our practice with, is just this like overwhelm or over capacity, and then this inability to kind of process and feel things as they are. And it just kind of builds up and then we don't know what to do with it. And so it comes out in ways. It can also come out in like physical pain. So what we see a lot is pain as a physiological process. Pain really is just a signal for you to pay attention to something in your body, and to make a change. So the fact that so many more people are experiencing chronic pain, autoimmune conditions, high anxiety, high depression rates, all of these things are direct reflections of how our body is able to process and release or not all of the things that we've been carrying with us throughout our lifetime. And there are definitely acute versus chronic pain. They kind of can relate to different things. And that's really fun. We can get into that later if you want, but
yeah. So
but
if I can like understand what you're saying. So what you're saying is that, so say I have pain. So say I'm this person and I'm like half stressed out. I've got some trauma. I got some unprocessed emotions and I'm really not blowing up at anybody. But I've got pain. Or I've got this chronic condition, or I have this autoimmune thing. So it sounds like from what you're saying that pain is just another way that if that's not you, then that suppressing of the emotion or that trauma and not processing it is going to show up somehow. It doesn't mean that you're going to blow up. It could mean that you're going to have pain or you're going to have a diagnosis of some sort or immune compromised in some way or pain.
Sure.
Correct.
Or it could mean that you just shut down. So like it's the chronic overwhelm where you're just like, I don't care anymore, you know?
So true. I don't think people talk about that enough. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a really hard place to be because even when things do that you enjoy or that bring you joy and that you love to do, or even opportunities to maybe move your body to get out of that sort of situation, you just don't feel like doing it, you know? And so that all of those things that you just referenced, the chronic pain, the short fuse, the autoimmune, the physiological responses, such as those, can be physical symptoms of trapped energy and emotions in our body. So sorry if you hear that. That's my dog. She's really excited to be on the podcast as well.
Well, I'm so glad to have her.
When emotions, the energy in motion, when they become stuck or trapped, it can lead to the loop becomes that of a dysfunction. So the body now uses energy to maintain safety within itself while also storing all of that stuff. So it's almost like it's at odds with itself. So then you have almost a power play within your own system of, this is where I want to go. The cognizant changing of habits or making behavior change that you're like, I know this is good for me and I want to do it. The motivation of it all. And then you have, but your body's saying, well, we don't have any energy to do that because we're already trying to hold on to everything. We're already trying to maintain safety within ourselves, but it's almost like a shut down, stuck sort of safety.
Yeah.
And that inability for the emotion, the energy to move and to clear out of a system can lead to the chronic pain, the trigger for your cognizant mind to pay attention to what's already kind of stuck in there. Because adding more, adding the motivation, adding the behavior change is almost too much for it at that point because it's already overloaded to a certain capacity.
And I've often read that your mind, your conscious mind's job is to keep you safe. Even if keeping you safe is really not in our world. And I guess I mean that it's supposed to keep you safe in this fight or flight. So
Right.
basically being in flight or flight in and of its own is not a safe place to be, but to your conscious mind it is. So even if it's stuck and it's holding you back from your dreams and your desires and your goals and all of that stuff, that conscious mind is still trying to keep you safe, whether or not it's in alignment with where you want to go and the things that you want to do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that becomes your pattern. That becomes your
Yeah.
loop. So it's almost like when you do try to make changes, when you try to get out of the situation,
Mm-hmm.
the stuck kind of loop that you're in, it's almost like, okay, well, we maybe are out for a little bit, but then inevitably over time we kind of find ourselves falling back into our old patterns
Mm-hmm.
because that's what our body is kind of, that's the loop that our body is kind of stuck in.
Yeah.
So even thinking back to experiences that have emotional charge to them, when you think about those experiences, are the emotions still as real in the moment
Mm.
as when you experience them for the first time? So
I love that. I
that's
love
kind
that.
of a fun exercise. Yeah,
It is.
because if they are,
Mm-hmm.
your body has not had either the time or the energy, usually it's the energy,
Mm-hmm.
to adequately process what that feeling meant to you in that moment.
Yeah.
And it gets stuck in your body. And so it's a somatic work as well as an energetic work to release the energy behind the emotion
Mm-hmm.
so that your body it gives your body the energy to process and release the emotion so that you can let it go. And there she goes.
So
So
I've been hearing the word somatic a lot lately and been kind of looking
yeah.
at it too. So I would love for you to actually define what that means for those of you who don't know what somatic means. And even for myself, I mean, I kind of do, but not really. So I'd love for you to just, what does somatic mean?
So a somatic is just relating to the body.
Okay.
So somatic is your body, it's the viscera within your body, so it's the organs, it's
Mhm.
muscle tissue, it's a body experience, so
Okay.
it's kind of the physical aspect.
Okay. So the somatic is the physical side of the body. So
Correct.
when you're using somatic techniques to release trauma, it's
Yeah.
is it is somatic emotional or it's purely physical? And it's a
So
combination or yeah, you describe that. I'm confusing myself.
the somatic aspect is going to be the physical aspect.
Okay.
So what I do is the process with which I interact with your system, with your nervous system, with your body is somatic and energetic. So I am physically interacting with your physical body
Hmm.
and allowing your nervous system to release stuck tension and energy within its physical system so that your body can have a somatic release. Sometimes it's breath, sometimes it's movement. Um, so, whatever that looks like for you, for each person, they kind of experience the release a little bit differently. Um, but it's a physical release so that the energy behind the stuckness can move. And then eventually it will move out of your body.
Hmm.
And then at that point, your body has more energy and pliability to make those conscious motivational behavior changes that then kind of push you in the direction
Mm,
of who you want to be and where you want to go. So having the energy available and freed up from
Yeah.
all the stuckness that's not there anymore, you can actually take more in during the day. But now we have strategies to process and release in the moment so that we're not holding on to things anymore.
And it almost sounds like, so say you have a goal in mind, and like you're pretty even keeled, and you've got a plan and you've got a strategy and you're moving along, but
Yeah.
just can't ever seem to hit that goal no matter what your actions are. So it sounds to me like if it's an emotional thing that you're unconsciously aware of, that is the obstacle. So it's not your actions, it's not this, it's not that. It's like this emotional component that could be stuck to a false belief system or whatever it is. But until that emotional component is released or unblocking that pathway, as you were saying, it's almost like you're gonna kind of always come up against this block. And some people call it self-sabotage, or
Yeah. I see that a lot.
stuck
Yeah.
and things like that. So it does sound like it has a big emotional component. And I did do the emotion code training, which was fantastic. And this
Yeah, that's
definitely
cool.
seems like there's a big component with it. And I'm always about learning things and then what's the best combination of all these things that I can do? So it's
Exactly.
just doing one thing like, oh, I'm just doing emotion code, or I'm just doing this, or I'm just doing that. Like, how do you, I always find the best is to combine them so you're getting the best release, healing, you're allowing the body to heal. And I guess you would say in its most free way. You're freeing up
Absolutely.
so much energy for the body to heal. And obviously your body can only take so much at a time, but I
Yeah.
find that, and how do you, is that sort of like, it sounds like that's a lot of what you're doing is you're combining. So you're combining, is it even combining traditional chiropractic, or how does it, I know I threw a lot at you there. So,
So it is and it's not. So
okay.
the chiropractic technique is called Network Spinal.
Okay.
Um, it is a little bit of a combination of different pieces
Mhm.
of different chiropractic techniques, but essentially it was established by Dr. Donnie Epstein. He's still alive and practicing. He's phenomenal. But he kind of broke down what it really means to adjust a person. So in
Okay.
chiropractic terms, it's um, a manipulation is when you just provide movement to a joint. An adjustment becomes a manipulation, but it's very a specific
Mhm.
time and place and purpose. What we do, Johnny kind of took it to the next level, and he called it an entrainment. So essentially, entrainment in nature, just the word entrainment, is bringing frequencies together
Mhm.
that are chaotic in bringing them into the same wavelength.
Ah, so bringing them
So
into
the
balance.
concept is that there's all of these different frequencies going on in our body,
Mhm.
and that's goes back to ancient Chinese medicine. The
Yeah.
entrainment will bring together the frequencies of your body to this coherent state.
Mhm.
So, what that allows for is more capacity for exploring your potential
Mm.
within your own system. And then that over time will expand and your capacity for the extraordinary, whatever that looks like for you, becomes almost like limitless.
It frees up the energy for us to do what we were meant to do here, which is to create.
Exactly. And what we were meant to do here is not just get by day.
I agree with
And
that.
so that's kind of the difference is that you're not coming in just to get cracked so that you're out of pain for a day and then you go back home and you go back to your box, like we were saying earlier.
What?
The
That sounds
concept that
fun.
we're working with, isn't it fun? The
No.
concept that we're working with is that there's so much potential within your system that's just waiting to be released. And so bringing coherence to your system will help to activate and release that potential so that now you can make the choices that you want to make and be
Mhm.
the person you want to be. And then if you're in pain, that kind of goes away
Yeah.
throughout the process because your body isn't holding on to these patterns anymore. And naturally, the chronic side, as well as the acute side of pain,
Mhm.
is a little bit more related to the stuckness. Um, but the pain being the signal to pay attention and make something change in
Yeah.
your life, that concept, the pain goes away as you release this potential
Mhm.
for your body and your system. And it
Yeah.
becomes much more, neuroplasticity becomes crazy. I mean, your body is learning and adapting at much higher rates than you ever expected. And then that comes through with like, you just find that you're standing up straighter. You find that you're owning who you are
Mm.
and who you want to be. And that's huge.
Yeah, that is. And I love the way you said like it really is opening up the possibilities to our own expansion when you are freeing up all that energy and all that creativity. No matter how you look at creativity, we're creating all day, every moment of every day, whether we like what we're creating or not.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And I can all see that. I can also see that the things that you were talking about, the pain, the chronicness, these are all symptoms. And we've often heard it that, oh, that heart attack that you had, that was your wake up call. And
Yeah.
sometimes you don't need to wait for these big wake up calls. It's the subtle ones like,
Exactly.
oh, this nag, but I can live with this. I can live with this pain in my lower back. I can live with this little bit of pain. But I think they're all signals saying, I need some attention. Like, and
Yeah.
where you don't want it to go is where it becomes a huge problem.
Yeah. And the concept of anything being a wake up call, that's almost like so far down the road. Like that's, you have to do something now. Otherwise, bad things are going to happen.
Mm.
What we're teaching your body to recognize are the subtleties of, I feel a little off today. What do I need to do to support myself so
Mm.
that it doesn't escalate further? Or
Yeah. Or
um,
so I don't
the
push
other,
it down. So I don't keep pushing this
exactly,
thing down and I process and
exactly,
release and process and release all these things.
process and release. That becomes your new normal, is the process and release. And the practice teaches your body to do that.
Okay.
Um, and it's kind of funny because there are different parts of your body that hold on to different um, things. So, like a low back is kind of like normally where anger tends to hang out.
Mm.
Um, Shoulders and neck are kind of like your burdens and responsibilities. Your hips are
Okay.
kind of like your foundation and like who you are in your kind of family structure. Um, but I was working with a woman the other day and I just brought up one of her kids and suddenly she was like, "Ooh, that spot on my back like just started hurting." I was like, "What spot?" She's like, "Oh, that spot like hurts every once in a while." And I was like, "Is it normally when you're talking about this specific kid who you have talked about having a little bit of difficulty with in the past?" She's like, "Actually, yeah, like that spot always comes up when I talk about him." And it's like, okay, maybe that spot is where your body stores like who you are in relation to your son, or like who you think you need to be as a parent. Are you doing a good job? Are you not doing a good job? Like that spot is your son. So like let's kind of think about the energy that goes with that. It sometimes is an emotion. We just call it energy to make it a little bit more broad. Um, but yeah, like, do you think you're being a good parent to your son? Do you get embarrassed when things happen and you feel like you are not doing well? Do you feel like you're failing? Do you do you get angry with your son? Like those things that go along with her son, she was storing it right there in that spot.
Yeah.
So the more we talked about it and the more she could name how she was feeling and then kind of process and release in the moment, that spot started to calm down and eventually went away. I mean, the whole process itself was like 5 minutes. So, yeah, she just started with us. So, the storing of the stuff, we all do it. It just
Oh,
looks
yeah.
different. And where it ends up for each person can be a little bit different.
And it shows
yeah,
how
it's just
interconnected we are too, you know. You may
exactly.
think
It can
that
be
you're
so
over
specific.
there. Yeah. And you may think you're over there, but I'm storing some of your you know what I mean? It's just like kind of crazy when you think about it in that way, that like we all affect one another whether we realize it or not. And it's all not necessarily in the same way.
Exactly. But then once we release that stuff, giving our body the tools and the energy to keep it released.
Yeah. And you had mentioned generational release. So that energy, and one of the things that we did learn in emotion code was once you release a stuck energy that is generational, you're releasing that energy from past generations and from future generations to come. So I'm sure that plays into this as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is all like the study of epigenetics.
Mhm.
So the genetic code being pieces of what make us who we are, and our bodies can choose how the genetic code is expressed
Mm.
for us and for generations to come. So the way that we um, break generational curses or traumas, whatever you want to call them, is first of all to recognize that it's a pattern that has been in your family, or just to choose that the health, wealth, and mindset, the whole healing process is like it stops with me. This is going to be my choice to heal generations in the past, and that's all epigenetic. I don't have a full grasp of really how that works from the past perspective. It's so interesting to me.
It really is. It's almost like
Yeah,
it almost, and I want to say take it as you will, but we do have the power within us to change our own genetic code.
oh,
I fully
absolutely.
believe that. I think a lot of
Yeah,
people think you need some kind of a drug or a manipulation externally of the body to achieve that. But I
right.
do, and there's a lot of people that are working, like I think Joe Dispenza is a big
Yeah,
one that it kind of shows you can change your genetics with emotional releases and the thoughts, because your thoughts are the what becomes things, and how they
yeah,
manifest depends on the thought. So, you know, it can manifest an external event, an internal event, like a disease or pain or whatever, but also the
yeah,
external things that we encounter, I think, are part of that as well. So we're not just manifesting pain and disease in our body, but it's like, you know, how was my day? Did I sit in traffic all day, or did I breeze through? Or was like my trip to the grocery store, I found everything I wanted, or man, they were out of everything. I think even things that we don't think
yeah,
of are sometimes a product of what we manifest depending on our thoughts.
yeah. And there's a really, really interesting concept about thoughts being the manifester of our reality is that based on kind of the frequencies that we resonate at. So each person has an individual frequency. It's almost the concept of like when you walk into the room, does it feel like the vibes are off?
Yeah.
Like, can you tell that there was like two people are mad at each other in that room, sort of thing? So our bodies are capable of feeling frequencies, right? So based on what level your body is frequencing at, if you have very low energy, your frequency is typically very low. if you feel like you're having the best day ever, you feel very connected to people around you, your energy is vibrating at a higher frequency.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting about thoughts is that, are you producing and thinking your thoughts and sending them out, or are you receiving frequencies that match your frequency as expressed as thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
So the higher we maintain our frequencies, the higher the quality of our thoughts.
And higher the
And then
quality of the input, right?
exactly. And then that translates, following your logic, into the quality of the manifestations.
Yeah.
So the more connected you are with yourself, the more connected you are with the universe, the more connected you are with manifesting
Mm-hmm.
what you want in this life. And that could be breaking the generational cancer component. So just because cancer has been in your family for the past couple of years doesn't mean that you also have to have cancer. Like, that's the whole concept behind it, is like,
Yeah.
is your frequencies can influence the expressions of your genetic code and the quality of life that you then live.
Yeah. And the more that we can learn and tap into this, then the higher quality of life and the higher frequency. And I think that's what's actually going on. And everybody says, oh, it's like the consciousness of the planet is rising. And you can kind of feel it. You can kind of feel it, even if you look back to, some of us still have grandparents from the Great Depression or whatever. And I imagine that the frequency, and the Great Depression was worldwide. So I imagine the frequency of just the planet alone was at a much different place than it is right now. And I think right now, even now, within the last even 10 years, we're going through an even accelerated leap, so to say, into that higher frequency, that higher consciousness. And as you said, if you're vibrating at that higher frequency, then all those other things are going to eventually dissipate. I'm not saying that they're not going to go away, but in your reality, you're not going to see as much of that. And that gets into a whole other conversation, but basically.
The same thing is true for our physical bodies as well. So like the higher the frequencies we're interacting with, is like the little things just kind of do tend to brush off. And so it's that, like, once you start to, it's what, like, practicing gratitude or like seeing positive things in life. It's like the more you start to recognize them, the more you see. That's kind of the idea of, like, we're moving towards health. That's our frequency. We're moving towards wellness.
Mm-hmm.
We're not trying to avoid or diminish something else.
Yeah.
So that's what makes the mindset of what we do with Network Spinal a little bit different. But it's on par with so many other, kind of back to what you said about combining different things to kind of create what you is like, it's on par with so many other health and wellness, just like experiences, that moving towards the life that we want and calling that in and manifesting that, versus feeling like every day you have to fight just to maintain a certain level of sanity.
Yeah, exactly. And then, and in today's world, it is so difficult because, like, we're all at this level, and then it's like, oh, well, I've looked at a lot in inflation lately, and it's like, oh, dang, like, I'm not here. It's like you're constantly being pushed under, but like, if you can get through that, then now you're rising above, and it isn't just about this or that thing that's terrible and going on.
Exactly.
You're frequent. It's funny. I heard this the other day, and I was probably listening to a podcast, and they were saying that even during World War II, there were villages and towns and probably countries that like they had no idea a war was going on. So you figure while this war and destruction and death and is like going on in the world, there's people that they're just living their everyday life. They have no idea. And it's like a little, when you think about it, you're like, like there's something to that. Like it is very interesting. It's almost like, I hate to say, like, I don't even know how to describe what I'm saying. It's like, well, pick where you want to be.
Yeah.
What I mean? And then if you do the things that bring you there, like vibrating at this higher frequency, then you don't get caught up in all this, like all the stuff
Yeah.
that they want you to get caught up in, the proverbial day, like
Sure.
the division and the this and the that, and this is bad and this is good, and this person is this and this person's that. And it's like when you can get past all of that stuff, you're living in an entirely different state of mind, so to say.
Paradigm shift. Yeah.
Yeah. But the key is to let go of all those things that are, I guess you could see it was funny. Like I had this little meditation the other day and I pictured, I was working with a coach and she had me do this meditation with my inner little girl, and I felt
Yeah.
like this little girl was just, I pictured her with these weights, like those like kettlebells or whatever. And it was like, stop taking on the weight of everything. And I think we do.
Yeah.
And those weights not only bring us down emotionally and physically and mentally, but they bring our frequency down as well. So I kind of looked at that like, okay, just like start dropping the weights that are holding you back and keeping you stuck. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah. That's exactly it too. And so knowing kind of what gets you to that higher frequency that you want to live at.
Yeah, because it might not be the same
And
for you as it is for me.
sure. Yeah. What energy rich, we call it energy rich. What that looks like for you, the things that could get you to that state might look different for me.
Yeah.
And then, so what Network Spinal does is it can help your body to actually recognize that frequency and actually maintain that frequency versus constantly like you do something to get you up to that point and then you kind of fall back into what your body is used to. So it actually will help release and retrain your body to be used to operating that higher frequency on. That's like your new baseline.
Yeah. And that's true healing.
So that's true healing. Yeah. And that's true genetic expression.
Yeah.
And that is passed down to your kids and your grandkids. And so the healing that we do for ourselves absolutely ripples out.
Growth.
Even the others around you too. Yeah. So
like being around someone that's like happy all the time. Yeah. It literally is infectious.
They bring you up to that level. Yeah, exactly. And so the more that we heal and maintain that higher frequency that we desire for ourselves, we actually now have the capacity to bring up our friends and our families and our communities with us as well.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a beautiful thing too, is like how much of an impact do we want to have not only on just the healing of ourselves and our family and our generational lines, but how much of an impact can we have on our world?
Yeah.
If we choose to kind of maintain this state of higher frequency.
Yeah. And no one person can do it by themselves.
No.
We have to do it collectively.
Everyone is capable of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the somatic aspect of it, is just teaching your body what that looks like. Because for some people, it's kind of a foreign concept. So, but it's possible for everybody. Absolutely.
So what does a typical session look like with you then?
So a typical session it's not super involved. It's basically just interacting with your nervous system. We have a series of checks. So the person that I'm working with will be lying face down on a chiropractic table. It's very comfortable. It's like kind of a soothing ambiance setting. So it's very nice. It's relaxing. And I'll just go through a series of checks to kind of see just how your body is storing and holding tension. And then what I do is I make just a super tiny little contact with my thumb or finger. We work mostly with the cervical spine, the top of your kind of neck area, and then your sacrum, which is like kind of your low back, into your hips. So those are the points in your body that your spinal cord actually physically connects with your bones, your spinal column. So we can interact with your spinal cord at specific points where it attaches so that we can actually unwind and release tension within your spinal cord, within your system, therefore releasing connective tissue, any tension within kind of your organ systems, all of the fascial connections. We can interact with all of that just with those two areas. And it's very light touch. It's very relaxing, enjoyable. Typically, it'll last between 10, 15 minutes at the most. And we just kind of you don't want to introduce too much change into the body all at once because your systems will not have the capacity to maintain that. So usually they will go back to their typical pattern. So we just do a little bit of change at a time so that it's sustainable, so that your body can maintain those changes. And over time, usually we do kind of a 12-week course. And then we just check in to see, like, who are you now? Who were you before? And we measure heart rate variability. We measure electromyography. So we do a whole bunch of testing on your body and your system to get data for your baseline. It's not just how do you feel, what's changing, because sometimes your conscious mind isn't always conscious of it. It can be kind of an internal change, which is nice because you don't have to show up and say, like, well, I know that I'm this way because of this. And so sometimes it's more of a subconscious release. So you don't have to come in and tell us your whole life story. We can just kind of interact with your body and get a sense for what you're carrying, what's serving you, what's not serving you. And then your body does all the work. We're just there to enjoy the show. So yeah, it's really fun. It's really exciting. We laugh a lot. Sometimes we cry, depending on what your release looks like.
Yes. And crying is a release. Yes. And I'm not a big crier sometimes. So it's probably why I got lost down there. Well, how do people get a hold of you? I mean, I have to admit, like I'm having an appointment with you next week. So I'll definitely have to have you back, but I'm very, very much looking forward to it. Like everything you're saying is in alignment with the journey that I am on. And I'm hoping that the journey that my audience is joining me on as well. Yeah. So your information is invaluable. Experience. Yes. And so much other stuff to talk about. Oh my gosh, I could go off on so many little rabbit holes, but I'll keep it to this. So how do people get a hold of you? And I know that this isn't really a practice that's virtual, that people can do virtual. Am I correct in that or no?
Not a virtual practice, correct. So it is a physical practice. Does take direct contact with a human. So there are network spinal doctors across America and worldwide, actually. There's multiple in England, Australia, France that I know of. So going to the Epienergetics website, that's kind of the overarching network spinal brand is Epienergetics. But even just Googling network spinal chiropractor, network spinal doctor, near me
Okay.
can get you pointed in the right direction.
Okay.
If you wanted to connect with me directly, I'm on Facebook and Instagram as I think Dr. Jess Crowley on Instagram and Jessica Crowley on Facebook. So
Perfect. And
yeah,
you are sharing lots more than this, especially in your space and online. So you're bringing much more to this than just the practice itself, So I
yes,
appreciate
exactly.
that. So for people listening, like what's one bit of advice? Is there anything they can do for themselves, or what's like one bit of advice that they can take away from this?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think one of the biggest things is just to trust yourself.
Mm,
Um, I think there's a lot of external influence that we can be swayed by. That can look like anything.
mhm,
But it can also be people around you where when you're willing to kind of take a step in a direction, or you have the space and the energy to make a change that you've been wanting to make, and then you have people around you that are kind of telling you it's not a good idea, or you shouldn't do that, or what do you mean you want to do that, like you've always been this way. It's like, trust yourself, because you know who you are and who you want to be, and that's a beautiful thing. And the people who are meant to be in your life will find you or stay in your life, and the people who aren't will find themselves kind of fading out. So that's a big thing that I think is lasting, for me personally. That's lasting impactful advice, and I hope you guys got something out of my talk.
absolutely. No, I love that.
Share a lot of words and get off on tangents for sure. So
No,
the
I
80s
absolutely love that.
brain
And I'm grateful
is
that I now have you in my life. So I appreciate you and so much of your time. And I can't wait to dig into more of what you do and experience it for myself. Everything, all the information and the links will be in the description for Jess. You can reach out to Dr. Jess anytime you want and look her up. And thank
sure.
you so much for taking the time, and even for your dog. She's part of it too.
That's that's
But
Basil.
it's good. So thank you so much. And until next time, this is Michelle with The Wealth Within Us.
Thanks, Michelle.